geopolitical truths are changing. In the last century, alliances were the key to relevance, a guarantee of security. But today, countries seek options. India is leading that change as a middle power. While buying arms from Russia, India remains a key Western partner. While attending the G7 as a guest, India keeps buying Russian oil. It's a balancing act that India has perfected.
पूरी दुनिया का आह्वान करता है.
A policy that offers dynamism and security. Could this be a strategy for the global south? Will it help India tackle the threat of a belligerent China? On this panel, we are being joined by Dr. Viviek Lall. Dr. Viviek Lall is the Chief Executive of General Atomics Global Corporation, the company that makes the MQ-9B Predator drones being acquired by India. Dr. Nidhi Bansal is Scientist G and the Director of the Technology Development Fund at the DRDO, Ministry of Defence. In years of service, she has had vast experience in fields of CFD, thermal mechanics, and electronic cooling. Dr. Subrata Bansal is Distinguished Scientist and Director General for System Analysis and Modeling, as well as Technology Management at the DRDO. He is also the Director for Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. Moderating this session is Vikram J Singh. He is a Senior Advisor at the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum and to the Asia Program at the US Institute of Peace. He's been a leader of innovation and public policy and global affairs at the US Department of Defense.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you. So great to see such a big crowd still here, and thank you to all the panelists for joining us. This is a really fascinating session because as India modernizes its defense capabilities, it is using its long-standing practice of having many friends and partners as a key enabler of that modernization. India is developing technology indigenously, and India is developing technology in partnership with a range of actors from around the world, including partners who, of course, are not getting along with each other at all right now. So we have a terrific crowd here of technical experts who are going to tell us what that looks like from India's standpoint. So Dr. Rakshit, I really want to start with you. Let us understand how India's efforts to really indigenize and modernize its defense capabilities work with its network of friendships around the world.
Thank you, and thanks to the organizers. It's been a pleasure to be here. And in many ways, for many of us to say our side of the story, which is a rare opportunity. I like the way the question has been put because it actually gets to the crux of it. That you would think that either you're indigenizing or you're dependent on outside and hence you want a whole bunch of partners. It actually works together. When you're doing an indigenization program from India's perspective, we need to have long-term relationships and dependable, trusted relationships because these things are not just one-off acquisitions. They would require a certain time period for it to fructify. Now, once upon a time in the non-alignment case, we did this diversification purely for a balancing point of view. Now it's important to understand that, as our EAM said, there's a re-globalization imperative coming in. If we want to have a whole bunch of trusted, reliable partners, we would need to ensure that in today's world, we would always have one of these suppliers available to us. In the past, two things happened. We thought we had good relations with someone and they were okay to be helping us, but a sudden crisis, a sudden division of the world into this camp, that camp, and you suddenly find that somebody is not so willing to supply us anymore. Or maybe a partner was willing to supply, but because of a crisis that has hit them, obviously they have to put their survival before helping us, and so that supply chain dried up. So it's very clear that going forward, we need to have a diversity just to allow for the different states the world might end up in the future. One friend giving it is not going to be enough, so it's an imperative for us to get in there. And it actually may be driven by the diplomacy. It tends to have very deep technical impacts. Because if you are going to be getting from different people, you need to have the ability subsequently as a country to put Humpty Dumpty together again. As was brought out by the army chief, services integration is an ongoing activity. It means that whatever you are buying today, you might need to put them together and make the systems talk to each other in many different ways. So how do you deal with that challenge if your supply chain is so diversified? And that's something that the Indian technical community would have to rise up and address. And that is where a modicum of indigenization helps, even in those cases where it may not be perfect. As the Raksha Mantri brought out, there's a short-term risk. But it's still necessary to mitigate the risk, at least partially, if we want to pull off this strategy of a diversified external linkage. Last but not the least, people tend to jump to the conclusion it's all about having a diversified inflow of systems coming into India. The diversification is as much on the outflow. So as was emphasized again by the Raksha Mantri, exports is an imperative. As was brought out by the Secretary of DRDO, that your status and your capability of export tend to have an interplay. So we also have to think that how do we go around exporting these systems in a safe way, that it should not tomorrow get us into problem. The systems we are exporting can meet multiple compliances in multiple places. So these are big challenges that the technical community is facing, and I think in the course of the various panelists, you will get different flavors of it. And specifically, I think a very interesting case is the increasing depth of our relationships with United States, where instead of just an acquisition, we still have acquisition, but we have it all the way going down to basic science and technology cooperation. So even in one specific relationship, we are now seeing a diversity like we've never seen before. So I think all these aspects, I will not take up all the time. I think all the speakers have their own perspectives to add. So this is the top view I could give.
You've set us up very nicely, because what we've now touched on is the old partnership, the old friendships and the new partnerships, the innovation that's happening at home, the innovation that's happening with these partnerships, but then also you've touched on the fact that India, while we often are talking about how India is managing all of the partnerships and what's coming into India, as it becomes an export power, it has to figure out how to manage its own relationships with those countries that will be receiving Indian technology, which gets even more complicated. So tech transfer is not just something that's restricting what India can get. Tech transfer is something India has to think about going out. And you ended with the United States and the fact that U.S. partners are involved in integrating technology at every stage, which is too good of a transition over to Viviek Lall, because General Atomics is actually doing that. So Viviek, just over to you about how, as an American defense prime, and an OEM, how you guys are approaching India with the opportunities it presents, and with and how you fit into this complex ecosystem that India is using.
Thanks, Vikram. Excellent question. I first want to congratulate Palki and her team for an excellent summit and very kind invitation to this forum and such excellent speakers. So to answer your question, and as was brought out, the U.S.-India defense relationship has really progressed. I mean, there have been the foundational agreements that have been put in place. There have been various programs like ISET that have been launched. INDUSX has been launched. Now, these allow for much deeper level interactions not just from a government-to-government perspective, but also from a business-to-business perspective, and not just OEM to OEM, but indeed in the Tier 2, Tier 3. And what's most exciting for me is with Startup India. So we have partnered with 2 Indian startups, and 114 AI and Third Eye Tech, and both are extremely technically competitive worldwide. And so it's not just about us being mentors and them being mentees, but it's about actually working at the same level, and some of their products eventually making it onto our platforms. So that was not possible several years ago, and it's really the leadership of the Prime Minister Modi and President Biden and both the NSAs that have launched some of this that has seen a huge catalyst in this relationship.
So even before a platform has been sold, you're integrating Indian deep tech, or your engineers are working with them to bring their capabilities into your platforms.
Yeah, we're working for the last year and a half, 2 years on that.
So that means you'll potentially be, India's in the process of acquiring the MQ-9 from General Atomics. It may come with Indian technology on it or being integrated on it when it comes. And Manoj, I think technology integration across all of these different platforms from all of these different places, technology from Israel, from France, from the United States, and of course from Russia, is something you confront every single day and have throughout your career. So maybe you can tell us how does India handle this, and how does Indian industry manage and benefit from this complex ecosystem?
Yeah, so basically we are talking about national integration, but in technology perspective it is called international integration. So international technologies are there, international different countries, platforms are there, and each platform is unique. They have something good. What we need for any program, like an Indian program, we require, let us say, we require MQ-9B also, but we have to integrate with our own indigenous system. So how to integrate those type of things, how to pick the best which is required for that specific role, and how to integrate that. So that integration itself is a technology in itself. And that technology we have developed over a period of time. Indian industry has developed period of time. And Bell, of course, was pioneer in that, because from day one, we started our journey with Russian equipments, and technology-wise, Israelis, US, UK, Europe, any country in the world, because every country has some unique electronic products. So electronic integration or platform integration with the best of electronics is the need of the day, and that technological experience, it comes based on, again, experience only. So more and more you take some particular product or some particular platform from some country and try to integrate, lot of challenges are there. But in the challenge only, opportunities are there. And over a period of time, I think we have mastered over that. And that's why, like MQ-9B is coming to India, we are not thinking of any real challenge for integrating it with other Indian platforms. So some of the buyer-nominated equipments we are already talking to, like General Atomics, how to handle them, how to have MRO for them, and how to seamlessly integrate them right when it comes to India. So those type of strategies are there for various platforms which are coming from Russian origin or which are coming from European origin, whether it is Airbus, that C295 type of program, how we are going to integrate that, how we are manufacturing in India by Tata Consortium type of thing, or how we are going to add our own electronics in those platforms. Challenges were there, challenges are there, but a lot of standardization is happening, a lot of technological advancements are happening, which makes the life today a bit more easier. And that's why there only the opportunity for indigenization also is there. Once we have this mix and match of different technologies coming from different countries, we can add or delete our own technology also in a much more easier way, especially in the name of upgrades, because we have to keep on upgrading this technology or these platforms. So at the time of upgrade, we add our own technology, or in the name of integration, like C4I integration, when these complex platforms has to be integrated. So that technology, definitely we have homegrown technology now for C4I. So this type of a diverse platform, integrating and giving a cohesive picture or a situation awareness type of thing. Across India, we have developed that ecosystem. Definitely, Bell has taken lead because Bell was established in 1954 itself for this self-reliance in this domain. But a lot of private companies have come up very well, and academia and startups. And especially the startups have come in a big way to help controlling this niche technology or this niche integration of the technologies also. That is in brief what I wanted to say.
So okay, that's great. There's about three things I want to come back to there. But first, Dr. Bansal, I want to go to when the startup's contribution to indigenization. The startup ecosystem in India is now the third and may even be the second largest in the world. And quite a bit of that is now starting to show up in defense, in space, in deep technology areas, and sensors, in areas that maybe not the consumer tech that got it going, and the software as a services that got technology innovation really going here. You are in charge of one of the most innovative programs in the ministry, which is to basically invest in and partner with these startups and get them going, and also to work on indigenization. So, for example, when you have trouble with supply and you have to rapidly try to indigenize in order to fill any holes that you might have. So, I just love to hear about that whole range of activity that you're leading.
First of all, would like to thank the organizers for inviting us here. Yes, the Technology Development Fund scheme that you were referring to is a Government of India initiative, and it is being driven by DRDO, where we are funding the MSMEs and startups for not only indigenization, but also for blue sky research. There's a whole lot of push from Government of India on this, and we have given almost 70 projects, and many of them are towards the indigenization, but also a few of them are blue sky research, like I talked about, the disruptive technologies. And yes, startups are playing a big role in that. So how this scheme is different from other schemes that we have in the ministry or with the government is that many of the other schemes are looking at the market discovery. There, the time to the market is lessened by seeing what is already available in the market and trying to fit that into the military requirements. Whereas in TDF, what we are trying to do is we are trying to do the complete R&D to bring in the technology in the country. And that is where the difference is. The startups and MSMEs have shown a lot of positive sentiments towards this. And because of that, the scheme, when it was conceptualized, it was for 10 crore per project, which is now gone up to 50 crore per project, where the 90% of the funding, the lion's share, is being given by the government. And that is, I think, a huge incentive for the startups. We are seeing a lot of new startups coming up, the whole ecosystem expanding because of that. And that is a very positive sign that we are seeing the youngsters, the innovators who are coming and joining us in this march towards, I should say, the self-reliance. And I'm very hopeful that we should be making good progress in that.
I want to do a little bit of a public awareness raising around the fund. Could you tell us when they partner with you, because hopefully there's lots and lots of startup founders watching this show, when they partner with you, what happens? How do they handle IP? What does their business look like? What is the stake that the state is taking in the company? Is it like an equity investment, or is it an IP play? How does that work?
No. So the best part about this scheme is that it is a non-dilutive scheme. We do not take any equity from the startups or the MSMEs. The IP is a joint IP where the government has a march-in rights in case there is a national requirement. But otherwise, the startups and the MSMEs, they can work on the variants. They can also, if it's a dual-use kind of a technology, they can also look at exporting them. And, it's kind of return on investment for us is the kind of foreign exchange that will be earning for the country. And yes, we do not take any equity, and it's not as a debt. We don't even ask for the money back from them.
So that's something that you should be looking into if you're doing defense technology for sure. Dr. Rakshit, I want to go back to you and dig a little bit more onto what Manoj ended with, which was about the export issue. So talk to me about the partners and the export issues. Now, of course, if you're using technology from one partner plus indigenous technology plus exporting, that could get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
That's the stuff we like the best. So, yes, when it comes to the export side of things, even before getting into the IPR issues, which are handled more at a government or at the legal department level, there's also the question of what would be a fair restriction or control to put on any technology item being exported. For sure, if you are doing an export right now, you are having a friendly relationship with a country. There has to be an element of caution that nothing lasts forever and the relationship might also change. So it is a fair ask that as the source providing it, we keep something back for our services. So yes, there might be some variants or some features which we have in the indigenous variety for the Indian services which we may not put on the table. At the same time, so long as I think we are transparent about it and we are upfront about it and there's no, somebody thought they were getting X but they get Y instead kind of thing. So, I mean, professionally it is being dealt with. And all it does is at the technical level, it puts a further incremental load on the design. Because if you did not design for that kind of decoupling and reconfiguration, it cannot be that once you suddenly succeeded, you suddenly realize that now I need a variant for export. And I mean, either it's an all or nothing kind of thing. So we are getting into that game and we are getting increasingly better at it. Certainly we've had a tutorial in how to do this from all the imports and the negotiations with respect to offsets and everything else that the Indian scientists have had to deal with. Because eventually it comes to the tech domain for these kinds of resolutions. And also this business of standards. See, standards are great. They allow for interoperability. They allow for the growth of a sector. Now, standards in the civilian domain can be completely open in terms of the best practices and in terms of codifying an interchange and saying where we no longer want any tinkering, this is what it is. So that part nobody tinkers with, everywhere else is the innovation. In the case of military standards, we still have this holdover from the fact that we have certain blocks. I mean, the archetypical one would be NATO and Warsaw, but even otherwise. So sometimes standards are partially open, but there are certain critical parts which are kept closed for the originating body of that standard. And all that it means is that you may not be able to upfront get a compatibility and you might have to do your own design thinking to fill in that component. So they are very much doable tasks. What all of this is also bringing out, that in the days gone by, say the 20th century, you would have worried very much about your production capacity. That once you went into production for achieving a certain orbit or meeting the ward losses during an engagement, you needed to have a certain production capacity. Now you need to have the design capacity to deal with all these innovations changing, and suddenly, as we were talking about, there is something called an emergency acquisition provision. At that time in an emergency, you might suddenly want to figure out how I take something from country X and make it work with our system or somebody else's. So the agility to continue the design process into an engagement, and especially if it's a unexpectedly long drawn out engagement as we have seen the world over. In all of those cases, whether it was the US, the NATO, the Russians, they have all had to actually run a design, development, debug, deploy and learn cycle in the middle of a shooting war. I mean, in the case of Americans, it was never a hot war in America, but for the rest of them, it was actually the war was on their head. And still, that has been happening. So we need to invest a lot more into our capacity in the research and design space to win that kind of engagements in future. So That's where we are.
You know, I mean, that's the last panel, the killer robots panel. That it's hard to match that. But they were talking a lot about the innovation on the battlefield in the last panel, Starlink in Ukraine and things like that. Of course, a lot of that has included loitering munitions, new drones, new unmanned platforms. Actually, Dr. Bansal, I want to go back to you just because on the innovation front, when you're talking about that, rapidly innovating in response to real-time developments, real-time conflicts, whether it's your LAC with facing the Chinese, or whether it's looking at what's happening in Ukraine or somewhere else, or with the Houthis in the Red Sea, where India has also been pitching in to help ships that are coming under pressure. How do you see the tools of the Indian government being positioned to help stimulate or drive that kind of innovation?
So like I said earlier, that we have different schemes with the government of India. Some of the schemes, like there's one IDEX, which is being run by, again, Ministry of Defense. There's the other department which is looking at. They are looking at the market discovery and the innovation and the things, something that can be procured right away and maybe, made to suit the military requirements. Whereas we are looking at more deeper things, and especially the ones where we have a single source of supply. We are trying to not be dependent completely on those supply chain and want to have domestic supply chain built around those projects. And we are also looking at the bigger platforms that are being done in the country, be it LCA or be it the future aircraft, where there's a lot of LRUs which are being imported. We are trying to see if we can indigenize most of them, so that the indigenization content and the dependence on the outside country for getting this, because we've been seeing a lot of disruption in the supply chain. And that is the reason that you do not really want that when you want it the most, you do not get it. So if you have your own capacity and the capability in the country, perhaps you will be a little bit more self-reliant on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Vivek, what Dr. Bansal just described is a lot. It sort of sounds like big companies are doing things in a similar way to what the governments are doing. Can you just talk a little bit about your adaptation, how you guys are looking at, you get products, you want them to be sold for 20 years and sustained for 40 years, but how do the rapid changes we're seeing in real warfare affect what you guys are doing as a company?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. The cycle time for design, development, maintenance, repair, overhaul, everything is shrinking. And so in this world, one has to be very nimble and very forward-looking in terms of what's coming down the pike in a few years and staying on top of it. Now, no one country has a lock on the best ideas, and that is why collaboration is so important. And in the aerospace and defense world, there has to be collaboration. There has to be synergies between various segments of the technology, and being able to predict that ahead of time and get investing in it. And one thing I may want to bring out on the investment side is the people resource, the human resources. I mean, to be able to get the trained workforce, the high-tech workforce, I think that will be the differentiator between nations that are able to innovate and get their folks into the right segments, because there are multiple choices for kids that are coming out of schools and colleges, etc. But to have a focused program to make sure that the talent levels are up and running is very important.
Can we talk about the talent a little bit? How India has got it almost feels like half of the world's young people live in India. I think it's about 50% under the age of 26. But maybe we'll start, Manoj, and then Dr. Rakshit will go to you to talk about what that capacity looks like and what it means, and then we'll do a quick down the line, and we'll be wrapping.
Okay. So in India, talent is not an issue. Indians are talented persons. We have to only mold them or give them a right environment, right infrastructure to do these type of developments. Like for AI development is very easy now. It's a NVIDIA one small card available on a laptop, given to young engineer, and we have largest number of IT professionals. You just give them the idea, oh, this is the platform for them, and this is the input data set. Once these two you give, remaining thing you leave it to them, they can develop great technologies, whether it is AI related or whether it is defense, use of AI, etc. Some domain knowledge only is required, which has to be given by DRDO or industry to them, and we can tap the real potential of them. Whether they are working in academia or whether they are working in startup, it doesn't matter. The talent is there with them. We have to only give them this type of a right domain knowledge, domain environment for them to develop great technologies.
And then the partnership piece of talent is major too. I mean, many of your best engineers have gone overseas for education, come back. There's a lot of efforts to foster more cooperation with the same cast of partners around the world for that, for basic R&D, for education, and even now for testing. They've announced, the US and India announced a testing consortium to work on testing technology together. So Dr. Rakshit, what about the international side of workforce and talent development?
So a couple of things. One is, as was being emphasized by the minister in the beginning, that there is a trade-off between short-term risks and long-term gains. So you want to prepare for a war and to be sure that therefore you don't have to fight it. The challenge of our times is that if you take an all-out resource commitment for doing that, you're going to lose the peace. So the issue is you want to prepare for war in such a way that you are continuously winning the peace, but ready to also win the war. That means that your investments have to be diversified. So you are getting into, well, the minister mentioned a whole bunch of things, but I will just focus on the tech sector. You still need to invest in deep science and deep tech. On top of that, you want to have the actually system engineering and production capacities in place. And on top of it, you should have a vast army of innovators who can keep making the small changes necessary to adapt to real-time evolutions of battlefields. That presents the enemy with a huge uncertainty actually when the fighting happens. At the same time, most of our investment is in a space which can anyway power our economy and culture while we are at it. So you do want to be able to have that. One thing is that you don't win by playing to adversary's strength, you want to play to your own. The advantage we have is that as all of this happens, life keeps getting more and more complicated. The standards get complicated, the rate at which technology is changing are getting complicated, the linkages between things are complicated. And that's where culturally we have an advantage. We have always been a very complicated society. So the issue is not so much that if you did a physical level IQ test, we would necessarily beat everybody else. But in our daily lives, we are used to having to use a lot of our brain to deal with the complexity of our daily lives. So I feel that is where we would have an advantage. So even if you throw a dauntingly complex compliance requirement on a company, the number of companies in India who could actually rise up and get that certification would actually be surprisingly high.
Well, it's a very exciting. We are out of time. That's an exciting way to end because it shows all the potential, but it is also, we've also highlighted the complexity, and I don't think it's going to get any easier. It's going to require a lot of trust and goodwill for all these partnerships to really work, and for India to leverage its unique approach to building its indigenous capabilities and its national security. And thank you all for joining us, and thank you all for sticking with us through the evening. Let's give them a hand.
Thank you. Can I request you to stay on stage? Mr. Singh, sir, could I request you to honor the panelists?